everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're all there. Fantastic. So thank you. I mean, we are off to a start. It's still the morning. We are early on in this 24-hour marathon of COVID-19 talks with the global theater community, marking the end of the Siegel talks. We did over 150 of them. So we will continue Siegel talks, but no longer just focused in a way on COVID. We started last March. Welcome everybody. Mumal, where are you? And Pallavi, what time is it where you are?
I'm in Rajasthan right now, and it's 10:30 p.m. here.
I'm in Bangalore right now, and it's 10:30 here p.m.
10:30. So welcome. Richard, I think most probably is in New York City in his
I'm
office.
in New York City. I'm in my place where I write.
Yeah, fantastic. And we take away your morning time, I know. And Liwaa, where are you?
Berlin.
Berlin, and it's already at 7 o'clock, I guess, right?
Yeah.
In the evening.
Yeah.
But let's go. We have a little, sequence. So let's start with our Indian friends and colleagues first. Mumal, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, I'll start with myself. So I'm from Rajasthan, and I'm a theater practitioner and a theater teacher. Because I was thinking about my identities, and theater teacher is really close to my heart. So I would like to introduce myself as a theater teacher here. And I'm working with theater as an environment to basically work on the alternative ways, to show alternative ways to the society. And my major work revolves around spaces and audience. I feel that the play should reach to the right audience. And for that, I'm trying to create alternative spaces in Rajasthan for the performances. That's what I'm doing in theater.
Amazing. Rajasthan is in the north of India, or?
Yeah, it's in north of India.
North of India. And Pallavi, tell us a bit about you.
I'm MD Pallavi. I'm from Bangalore. I'm an actor, singer. I compose music. I'm also a filmmaker, and yeah, these are the things that I'm basically. I would love to do anything that is related to performance, and I'm constantly looking for collaborations with multidisciplinary artists. Yeah.
Yeah. So how has the situation been for you personally, and what do you think about? Start as and then about the situation in India, but how has it been for you personally, that time of COVID?
Is that for me?
Yes, Pallavi, maybe you start.
Yeah. So what happened was, just before COVID hit the world and India, India was in the middle of these huge mass protests. The Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Registry of Citizenship, and a lot of people across the country were protesting against these acts. And I was also very actively involved in those protests. And the protests continued until March. And what happened was that COVID hit the world, and the protests had to be called off. And I mean, that danger is still there, that they might just bring the act in, and we will still have to go out and protest at some point. But a lot of people were put in prison, and they still are in prison because of that. And then suddenly this happened, and we all were like, it was suddenly like a huge like brakes applied to everything that we were doing. And personally, for me as a performer, everything came to a standstill. All my concerts, because I also perform as a singer, my concerts were cancelled. My performances, plays, rehearsals, whatever was happening just came to a standstill. And then, of course, in the initial days, there was this huge anxiety of what do performers do, and how do we perform? And we tried all kinds of things. And those were the days when the first lockdown was announced in India, and it was announced very suddenly without any kind of preparation. And the whole world saw these thousands of migrant workers walk across hundreds and thousands of kilometers to their houses or to their homes back home. And we were sitting at home, the ones who were privileged and sitting, but we also were trying to raise money and work for food relief. And a lot of brave people stepped out, and people like me who couldn't, because I have a very young daughter, a little baby at home, and an older person at home. I didn't dare step out of the house, but we were doing a lot of relief work just online and phones and all that. But the artist in me was also craving to do something, to do something with my art and my craft. And there was this opportunity presented to me. They asked me to do some kind of a performance for an online platform. And I did a solo performance of Abhishek Majumdar's script, Salt. Oops, sorry. I hope you can see me. Okay. Sorry, the electricity just went. So that I did an online solo performance of that. And then what happened was the lockdown was lifted, and it seemed like the first wave had passed, and maybe we could go back to the theaters and perform again. And Abhishek, suggested to me and a very small group of artists that maybe we could do a play with just 4 or 5 people rehearsing in the room. And we did rehearse for a month, maybe less than a month. We devised a play called Desdemona Rupakam, which looks at the death of Desdemona and why did it happen the way that it happened. And we tried to look at parallel stories that we tell in our culture, in our lands, where the woman is, what kind of an agency does she have when presented with similar circumstances. And thankfully, what happened was, while we were rehearsing, unfortunately, I got COVID, and it's a two-hander. So my co-actor also got COVID because of me. Thankfully, nobody else got COVID because they were all wearing masks even during rehearsals. But we both got COVID, and everything was stopped. We couldn't do the production. We couldn't continue with the rehearsals. And then it took us at least, it was quite a serious infection, and it was quite a bad COVID infection that we got. I was in the hospital for some time, and then we came out, and then again we resumed our rehearsals at the end of March, in March. And in April, we did the shows. We performed Desdemona Rupakam. And as soon as we performed Desdemona Rupakam, soon after that, the second wave hit us. And we thought the first wave was bad, but the second wave just kind of absolutely took everything out of our, it took our breath away, basically, and literally, because I was also one of the few people who was, a part of a relief team, and we were arranging for beds, oxygen, blood, plasma, even money sometimes, medicines, a lot of these things which just were not available to a lot of patients.
Incredible.
And
yeah. What came out? Mumal, how was it for you? Was it a similar? What do you think about India at the moment?
So basically, my work revolves around women, especially young women of Rajasthan and their choices. And earlier in 2019, I was trying to create alternative performance spaces in Rajasthan. So we were taking our place to terraces. We were going to the colonies. We were asking, we were going door to door and asking people if we can perform on their terraces. And results were unbelievable because people started inviting us to perform at their terraces. And a lot of women came to watch our plays, and we were talking about them in their spaces. We were talking about their rights in their spaces. And by the end of 2019, we were thinking that we are able to create a sort of movement or something, that women are coming together. They are talking about their rights. And these are the women, those are homemakers. They are living, they're housewives. They are called housewives here. And we were thinking that, the second thing that we were planning, that as a group, we will actually collaborate with these women, these housewives, not with the artist or something, with these housewives. We'll take their stories and we'll work with them. And then COVID came all of a sudden. And that entire energy that we had, that we'll perform and we'll do this and that, it just suddenly took a turn and we had to sit back home. These women were also locked and we were also locked at the home. So personally, for me, I thought my subject was always living with me. My subject was these women and their stories, their life stories. And where I'm living, there is a colony. And I used to see that the women are working endlessly. Like earlier, before pandemic, the male were going to the offices, the children were going to the schools and tuitions. Now they all are 24/7 at home. And she's working continuously like a machine. And I used to see in the balconies of the apartment, like this is the entire collage of a balcony, and the women are working, like some are working in the kitchen, some are doing some sort of work, and the male are just reading the newspaper or something. Because I do not know about the other states, but in Rajasthan, it's strong patriarchal structure here. And women are expected to do certain defined gender works. And these are the women, those who are subject of my play. And I was concerned about them. I was reading the researches, I was reading the surveys that what is happening to these women in the lockdown. And I came to know that the number of domestic violence doubled in last 1.5 years in India. And even in then, the Hindu newspaper says that the 70% of women are not even filing the cases because they are afraid that the case will get worse. It will go out and we'll talk about it. Our husband will say something to us. And I was just thinking, how can I help them? Earlier, we were working through theater. We were going to the community. We were doing theater for awareness. But now we are sitting at home. How can we create a safe spaces for these women? How can we offer them support when we are also locked?
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting. So you went to their people's home, to their terraces, you created stories with them and by them, and lockdown happened, and now the violence, domestic violence, which is, most numbers are not recorded, especially in India, and we often hear it in the news, and it doubled or 3 times full. Have you both prepared a reading? Will you do a reading, or should we continue a conversation, just so I know?
I have prepared a poem.
Yeah. And what about you, Pallavi?
I will sing something.
Okay, so maybe we start with the poem.
Okay. Wait. So I'm actually, Tanvi told me about this, that we have to dedicate something to the artists, those who have died due to COVID. But I thought to myself that I really want to dedicate the poem to all the sisters who are actually tolerating the inhuman behavior in the 4 walls of their households.
Okay.
Those are losing spaces. So I'm going to read a poem from a book, Growing Up as a Women Writer. The poem is written by Joya Mitra. It's to my sister. You stand within the room. I can see you. With the mark of the turmeric on your hand. Your tired eyes bearing the strain of nights of sleeplessness. With my back aching all over. An excruciating pain along my shins. It hurts to straighten the head. I want to touch you. I send my song to you. Through the slits behind these bars, the song turning into a bird with its wings broken, struggling through the darkness. Your 8 arms, your 6 heads, straddle all the directions. Insects, mud, and grass stick to you, almost stifling you. In a mad spell of restlessness, You pick up your pen, even as your tired fingers twist with the effort. Your letters burst beyond your small table, roll down beneath, fill the room, your blood spilling with everything coming to be. Your letters, like the flow of your blood, flow along the streets. Still, your blood-stained letters come halfway to touch my song. Sister mine, I can see you. Sister mine, I grip your hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we can see you, Mumal. And thank you. Pallavi.
I'd like to sing a song written by a poet called Sule Sankava, who was a prostitute in the 12th century. And there was a huge movement against the caste system in India when she also gave up her caste, and she wrote this poem. So I'm singing that one for you. ಒತ್ತೆಯ ಹಿಡಿದು ಮತ್ತೊತ್ತೆಯ ಹಿಡಿಯೇ ಹಿಡಿದಡೆ ಬೆತ್ತಲೆ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಿ ಕೊಲ್ಲುವರಯ್ಯ ವ್ರತಹೀನರಿದು ಬೆರೆದೆಡೆ ಕಾದ ಕತ್ತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೈ ಕಿವಿ ಮೂಗು ಕೊಯ್ವರಯ್ಯ ಒಲ್ಲೆ ನೊಲ್ಲೆ ಬಲ್ಲೆ ನಾಗಿ ಒಲ್ಲೆ ನೊಲ್ಲೆ ಬಲ್ಲೆ ನಾಗಿ ನಿಮ್ಮಾಣೆ ನಿರ್ಲಜ್ಜೇಶ್ವರ ನಿರ್ಲಜ್ಜೇಶ್ವರ ನಿರ್ಲಜ್ಜೇಶ್ವರ
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the words. What does she say? We have
She
2 minutes left. Yeah.
She says, once I have slept with one man, a man of a certain class. I dare not sleep with a man from a lower class, because then they will take me, pull me by my hair, strip my skin, skin me alive. But I know that you will understand these problems, and she's referring to you, who is her divine, who thinks is her God. And she calls him Nirlajjeshwara, which means the uninhibited Shiva.
How beautiful, how beautiful. And yes, indeed, a timeless song. So really, thank you both, Pallavi and Mumal, for staying up for us and putting up with us and all the emails and preparations for this big event. So really, thank you, and I hope you will be able to stay with us. We move over now. We go to Liwaa, and in Berlin. And Liwaa, tell us what's going on. Where are you?
I'm in Berlin, in Charlottenburg, but I'm Syrian, and I just arrived from Syria like less than a week ago. And it's remarkable to see the difference between being in Berlin and going to the global south, and see how, I mean, Corona at least works in these two places. I mean, it really works differently.
Tell us a bit about Syria. What's happening?
End of May, there were like the pseudo kind of elections for the same president over and over again. And so I attended the democratic wedding. That's what they use to describe it. So, and with mass gatherings in the squares and people over each other in stadiums and like concerts, and like everything is kind of manipulated, kind of staged actually, like, of course, in a totalitarian space. I mean, you never expect these things to happen spontaneously. So, I mean, people over each other in the streets and like marching and celebrating the surprisingly new president, which is the same president. And so, yeah, I mean, it was so hard to see that, but I really intended to see it. And then I just spent time in the country, and yeah, because that's really part of my, I mean, the thing that concerns me, and like the creative tank of my work coming from that place. So, I mean, living in Berlin is so important also to see it from outside and to see sometimes where is the accent is really taking place. I mean, in both societies, and to study, I mean, actually. And Corona is so vocal in this issue, because here, like, spacing and masks and vaccination and they're like as if Corona does not exist. And it's really stunning how it's not really breaking out into more and more numbers. Honestly, I don't know anything about real statistics coming from Syria ever since. So I don't know the numbers of people dying from Corona, but people gave up Corona. It kind of, they really like had too much, and it was just the cherry on the cake just to have Corona after like a devastating war and militarization. And I mean, the economic situation is the real Corona over there. I mean, it's the real concern. And so yeah, it feels like there is a moment when they cannot take it any longer, and they just like really stopped, I mean, believing in that Corona exists, although it exists and people are dying. And like, we hear stories, but I mean, people can no longer really carry all these kind of missions at the same time. Is like to pursue a life after war, to find a way to come up with money in this really devastating economic situation. So, I mean, with Corona, it's just too much.
Yeah, one can only imagine what it means in a country like Syria to have that Corona on top of everything. And just thinking that this is not even the biggest problem. And
no, it is. I mean, yeah, it isn't. It just adds to their difficulties in life. I mean, life was so difficult, and this is another, I mean, kind of layer. And I don't know if there all these jokes about there is a meteor coming from space, and like maybe also the Chinese rocket who missed the route, and like, yeah, all of these things were like funnily were kind of approached like saying, yeah, please come to Syria, we're anyway destroyed already, so we can just take everything from the universe here. So in a way, it levels up the sarcasm level, and it makes life more tragic and more difficult. But it's not the only thing that really concerns people. Like some really, they don't have access to money, to food, to water, to electricity, and to, I mean, to basic necessities of life. So, I mean, the idea of stopping work because that what should really happen in times of pandemic is out of question. I mean, there's no system that carries, I mean, that would help them to live. I mean, there's no way, I mean, there's no infrastructure, I mean, social infrastructure, let's say. People's savings are all eaten up by war. So, I mean, and some, they don't have houses. So, I mean, it's really absurd now. I mean, people just put their masks sometimes when they have masks. I mean, they put it down here. It just looks like another part of their body, but it's not a mask, you know. And they said, we survived chemical weapons, we survived bombs, we survived so and so and so. I mean, what about virus now? And it's not, I mean, it could be, I mean, scientifically incorrect, of course, but I mean, from the life going on over there, it's their only answer to it. And some, I mean, the people really go to cafes and drink and go and do all these things. There is a kind of a special narrative in the governmental level that there is a Corona and there is like a committee studying a committee, doing a committee. So there is all these kind of committee branching out from another committee to study and to facilitate, and I don't know what. But people really are in a
That's
different
incredible.
planet. And there is like one funny story I would like to say, that
Yeah.
there is one office, like governmental office for like the passports and foreigners and stuff, where you're not allowed to get in unless you have a mask on. And there is a guy downstairs near the gates who's selling masks or renting out masks or renting used masks. So, I mean, you can rent a used mask down there, which is cheaper than you buy a new one. So you just rent a mask that was worn by somebody who was inside, and you put it on, get inside, and actually you put it just like in a way, no matter how, just to show them that you have a mask, and then you just go out, give it back, and you get your money, I mean part of your money, and then another one gets and use it and go back. So it's coming back to Germany, it feels like, yeah, I'm just like coming from 1009 and
That's incredible. You are, Liwaa, you are a poet. You wrote over 100, 150 soap operas from Syria to survive. They are the most successful in the Middle East. You also had a play that was staged at the Royal Court. Can you work? Do you work?
In time of Corona, I slowed down, and it feels like kind of the universe is working on my inner rhythm right now. So, I mean, just also because I'm really, I like to work a lot, but also there is this fantasy of like slowing down and watching, and here it comes. And yes, I wrote a lot of notes. I mean, I wanted to be part of what's happening, not to kind of bubble myself again, just to continue my projects. So it was interesting for me to see how, I mean, we're all interconnected again, because I'm so concerned about the issue of refugees and the interrelation between, I mean, a place like Europe and a place like Syria and the whole Middle East at the moment, and how they are kind of intersected in a way, but Europe, or let's say the global South, try to define this relation while the other part does not. In a way, selling weapons to Syria and not getting refugees from there is a kind of unequal equation, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a moment now with Corona when we're all interconnected in one problem, regardless to, I mean, how it initiated in Wuhan or not, and like, but at least something happened somewhere. I mean, somebody did something, or something happened, or whatever, in the Far East, and we're all affected by that. And for me, it's kind of culmination of this idea that I was trying to kind of work and think about in terms of refugees and war and economy and climate change and all these things. So, I mean, yeah, refugees coming due to war reasons are just part of it. I mean, there would be hundreds of people moving for so many other reasons in the future. So, I mean, and the idea that, I mean, the rich countries are, you know, have nothing to do with it and they cannot get refugees. Yeah, but stop selling weapons and stop interfering in a different way. Stop kind of protecting the dictators in that area. So, I mean, in a way, Corona came to emphasize the fact that we are all affected. I mean, when something happens somewhere, like we're all affected.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it was a time to also understand this more.
Did you prepare? Will you read us something, or should we continue the conversation?
I have something in Arabic. I mean, it's a poem in Arabic. I can read it, and
read it in Arabic and then maybe in English, both.
I don't have a nice proper translation because it's, I mean, I don't.
Well, then you tell us about it. You tell us.
I will tell you about it.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and sometimes it's just the only thing that yeah. Okay. So here is another one, all of a sudden came out, not the one I prepared, like, but another one pumped up. It feels like this one won't be read. So I have a translation.
Mm-hmm.
It's called A Glance. I will read it in Arabic first and then in English. لا أؤمن بالله ولا يؤمن بي. لا يعدو الأمر أن يكون أكثر من سائق الباص الذي قد ينظر إلي أحيانا بمرآة وهو يقود. So it's a very short thing, and I will read it now in English. It's called A Glance. I don't believe in God. and he does not believe in me. It's no more than the bus driver who may glance at me sometimes through his mirror while he drives. So yeah, just a very short.
Short reading. Well, thank you, really, thank you for sharing. What did you think about your Indian colleagues when you heard Mumal and Pallavi?
Yeah, first of all, I have some regards to Pallavi from Swati Simha, a friend of mine from India. And yeah, we're connected. And yeah, and I told her, like, she was saying, say hello to the friends. And yeah, I'm actually, I remember hearing Richard Schechner's Siegel talks some months ago. And he was saying, like, until now, I remember that he said something, until now, Corona didn't arrive to India yet. And like, when it arrives, things will be different on the globe. And I feel like it's now a very important moment that what he was talking about really happened. I mean, it's really different. I mean, like with India, it's really, really different. I mean, it's a kind of like the worst scenario. I mean, like when things really go out of control. And yeah, and I'm hearing now from the morning when you started, I'm hearing, and I'm like really so in a way astonished at first, and then so I don't want to say proud, but that's it. I mean, that like theater people are so involved. I mean, it's in Syria, the thing happened actually while the revolution happened in Syria, that Syrian like artists and especially theater artists were involved in the demonstrations, and like we have some iconic names, but we don't have that attitude during Corona because like the country is kind of really geographically is incapable of defining right now. I mean, it's Syria, but I mean, to see this thing with India is really, it highlights, I mean, a kind of different level of importance and involvement.
Yeah, and I think the work that Abhishek, who is with us, what he did, staying up night after night, as I said earlier, I remember my Siegel talk with him. He said, I'm now going to call 114 people on the list, where we try to help them to connect to something. Abhishek, what comes to your mind when you hear from Pallavi, from Mumal, from Liwaa?
I mean, I hear from Pallavi and Mumal very, very often. So it's really like meeting friends who I meet regularly. And Liwaa, it is wonderful to connect to you. I'm just reminded, with these conversations that we are having, and the last one where we saw the puppet Amal, and
by the way, I'm part of the puppet. I mean, I'm part of the woke as well, and I was so happy.
Are? Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, so I was happy also.
Amir, isn't?
Yeah.
Isn't Amir also part of that?
Yeah, Amir is part of that, and I'm writing. Yeah, and I'm writing as well, like as like letters to Amal from her mother or from her aunt, and the cities that she's moving on. Yeah,
it's a wonderful project. Yeah. I was just saying that, I think from the last one and this one, what really I'm thinking about is this enormous role that women have played in this towards relief, in every place, and the price that women have paid for this. And it's so clear also that in all these countries which have had strong women leaders have in fact come out much stronger even in administration and taking care of the corona than essentially the big nationalist countries like ours, Brazil, Turkey, where there was a positioning of these strong leaders who took over, these men, and they're complete failures at it. So in India as well, I think there's a lot of narrative around the complete failure, the male failure, and looking at women as really the new. There are heroes everywhere now, in this country, because the states which had women ministers, they did better. They're out there in relief work, and I think both these conversations are more and more. They were reminding me of that power that somehow we have missed out, especially in this chauvinistic moment in India.
In our Siegel talk, Abhishek, you mentioned the lynchings in India. So what is happening at the moment there?
You know, the thing with, I think there is a continuous stoking of tensions between Hindus and Muslims every time there is an election in some place. So now there is a big election coming up in a northern state in in Uttar Pradesh, and things are heating up for that. So unfortunately, uh, it's not something that's receding, because law and order is falling into a real abyss. However, what is even worse is that 4 years ago, one had to actually, you had to go out on the road and somebody would have to lynch you. Now that doesn't happen because there are laws which protect the lynchers. There are so many laws that have changed in the last few years that essentially now legally one can be put in prison for carrying a piece of meat, and you wouldn't need to be lynched on the roads. So that's where I think that is there, where we are. We are also. I was just thinking, this virus has also revealed a particularly undemocratic moment in the world. It's a combination of this right-leaning, undemocratic moment with the virus, which seems to have erupted in that way.
Liwaa, why do you think the Syrian arts community is not as connected or on the side of helping like Abhishek? Is it because if they're helpless themselves, it's just not possible to intervene? They have given up?
It's so scattered, and I mean, they are not like one body and no longer. I mean, like some of them, they are still in Syria, the others are in France, in Germany, and like they are overwhelmed with, I mean, with their legal status, with their economic status. I mean, after 10, 11 years now being kind of displaced or deprived of work. In Syria, there is this kind of blackout propaganda about Corona in a way, let's say. I mean, like people really disconnected from the idea of Corona because they can no longer take any other dire situation, like any extreme, no more extremes possible. I mean, we just hit the wall. So kind of, I mean, any togetherness in a way, it is suspicious in a place like Syria now. Like there are some organizations that kind of, they are like kind of governmentally approved, gongos, not NGOs, all these things, like they might interfere. They're like the government are giving some kind of food or stuff to poor families, but that is happening way before the Corona, just because of the war. So in a way, I mean, the body of the artistic scene, I mean, the theater scene is so scattered and shattered, and like, in a way, we were all pushed into individualistic salvations. So I mean, that is, I mean, after the revolution times, I mean, in the revolution times, like they were really one cluster where like really like a girl, an actress like Fadwa Suleiman, and really she was ahead of all the demonstrations, and like she did in cancer in France alone, and like neglected. So I mean, the things that happened way before, like in these years, in a way, scattered this idea of
it made it impossible. Yeah. It really made it impossible. So we will see. And I really feel for you. I remember the story when you said your father, you had to pick him up, and he was in the coffin in your car, and you had to go through police controls, military controls. They wouldn't believe that's your father. I mean, stories that are just incredible in times of civil war. And now you are a refugee, but you're in Berlin, and you're writing a series also for Netflix, I think, or HBO. I forget.
Yeah, I'm writing, and I'm working on my second film. It's a documentary, and I'm also working on a play. And
yeah,
like
it's incredible story. So you're an inspiration to all of us. We really, thank you for having you with us and taking the time and being such a good friend. So now we are with Richard Schechner, who is, in the terms of chess, he would be the grandmaster of the game of what we are in, of performance in theater. He coined that term of performance, and he has such deep insights. He's transcending, I think, the field that's like novelists sometimes who don't just, talk about their novel, but about the life where we're in, about politics. So Richard, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. And it was very intriguing, powerful to listen to, Liwaa and Abhishek Mumal, to hear the song, to hear the poem. I wrote down here, hope and horror. There's a kind of hope and there's a kind of horror that we are facing. And what I wanted to remember is my long, long, long history in India and with India and Indian thought, and the relationship of that and Indian theatrical practice to myself, to Grotowski, to Philip Zerilli, who passed away. I first came to India in 1971, so many of you weren't alive when I first came to India. I would think that maybe Frank, I think the rest probably were not on this planet yet. I don't, at any rate, it changed my life and continues to change my life. I showed you over here to my left, there's a kind of shrine to Shiva, and there's my conversion certificate. I'll show, because it's paradoxical. So you can't really read this, but it says, and I'll read it, this is to certify that Mr. Richard Schechner, New York City, a Jew by faith, has been converted into a Hindu and named Jaya Ganesh, as per his request after performing purificatory rites at this ashram, the Sri Ram Krishna ashram in Trichure, Kerala, on the 7th of July, 1976. A year I spent all of the year in India, and I'll be reading some more from that journal. So here I am, a Jew, an atheist, a Hindu. At the same time, I hate Hindutva. Now, you've talked a little bit about politics, so I want to begin there. That's the horror. The horror is Mr. Modi, who is kind of worse than Trump, or who knows worse than Trump, in the same league as Trump and Bolsonaro and a lot of others. I have many Muslim associates in India. And Hindutva, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of Hinduism uber alles, if you will allow me to do this. And we talk about lynchings, we talk about violence, we talk about, you know. And then Mr. Modi also advocated a festival called the Kumbh Mela, which I attended, not last year, but where millions of people come together in close contact. So at that point, advocating for the existence of the Kumbh Mela this last February further sowed the seeds of the catastrophe that COVID is in India. Today I read that probably around 3 million people have died of COVID in India, whatever the official, and that's an enormous, you know, one thing about India, whenever anything is done in India, finally it's done at enormous scale. At the same time, it's done at a very tiny scale. So I want to, you know, and Frank, you have to tell me when I have about 4 minutes left, because there's something.
Okay.
So I arrived in India in 1971, and the first thing, many things changed my life, but 2 events in Madras, now Chennai, were very important to me. I had the privilege of seeing Bala Saraswati dance. Now, many of you don't know who she was, but Bala Saraswati was, you know, as great a performer as Stanislavski, or whoever, the greatest. And she was performing, and this will connect to what I do at the very end, a famous story about Krishna. When Krishna's mother, Krishna's a little boy at this point, he's not a god, and he's playing, and he puts dirt in his mouth, and his mother scolds him and says, spit out that dirt, spit out that dirt. And Bala is dancing this. By the time I saw her, she was in her 50s, so she no longer had a slim Bharatanatyam body. She was, you know, hefty, and she no longer really was doing much with her feet. She kind of kept step, but her abhinaya, that means her abilities to act, her mudras, her hands, her eyes, her face, you know, it's 60 years ago. I'm there, and she shakes her finger at Krishna, spit out this dirt, spit out. He says, no, he's a little boy. And finally, she makes him open his mouth, and she looks into his mouth, and what does she see? She sees all of creation and its destruction. The same thing that J. Robert Oppenheim saw when the atomic bomb came up, when Krishna, who is the beginning and end of all existence, but inside the mouth of her son. And he says, as the God now, what can I give you to the mother? And she says, what you can give me is to take away all memory of this, so that when this is over, I will only have my son. I do not want the God. And Krishna grants that, and it ends with her playing with her son. I just, I can't tell you what a powerful performance that was. That same week, I met a man named Krishnamachari. Now, Krishnamachari is a great yoga teacher. He's passed now. He was in his 80s when he met me. And he allowed me to become his one-on-one student. And I studied yoga with him intensively every day. Not for long, 5 or 6 weeks. I have it all written out in my notebooks, the daily lessons. I still practice that yoga. And that also changed my life. So those two things in 1971. And then in 1976, I returned to India and I saw Kudiyattam and Kathakali and Chow and Odissi and Bharatanatyam and Kathak and Yakshagana and Jatra and Kalariyapayattu. I took Philip Zimmerman to see his first Kalariyapayattu and Ramlila. So these are folk forms, but folk is the wrong way to say it. And in the West, we don't really have this kind of thing. There are other parts of Asia and Africa that have it, but these are living traditions, or at least when I saw them, they were absolutely living traditions. So they were both avant-garde because they involved audience participation. They involved environmental theater staging, where the mix between the audience and the spectators was very, very well modulated. So that they had a profound influence on my theater practice and the things that I did as a director. They also had a profound influence on Grotowski. I think probably people know this story, but Eugenio Barba came to the Kathakali Kalamandalam. That's the place in Kerala where the Kathakali dancers and actors are trained. Some of them, it's a leading school. And he left a notation in the guest book, which I found when I was there. And he had come and he said that the exercises that he saw would be of great use to Mr. Grotowski. And so he brought some of these exercises back to Grotowski, and they formed the basis of what Grotowski later called the plastiques and the movement exercises, which when I studied with Grotowski, he taught to me. So it kind of goes back and forth, these training that you had in Kathakali, which involves back bends and exercises for the body core, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this profound Indo-European connection, which at one side of the bridge goes back 4,000 or 5,000 years to the first incursion of the people from Central Asia, the Aryans at that point, who came into India, and the basis of the Indo-European languages discovered by German philologists in the 19th century. But then all of these years later, through Grotowski in the theater, the bringing back of this intensely physicalized idea that meaning can be and ought to be embodied. So those are some of the things that stay with me and affect me. And another strand are the Indian students, people. I mean, of course, Indian artists, and I'll talk about some of them in a moment. But I also had a number of Indian students, ranging from Sudipto Chattopadhyay to Anurima Banerjee, who does Odissi, Shayani Mitra, who worked on street theater in Delhi, and Shanti Pillai, who was brought up in Auroville, brought up where the mother and Sri Aurobindo has had a settlement in Pondicherry. So India is, of course, for me and for many, a multiplicity. It is a global whatever. It is also, I don't want to bring cold to Newcastle, but it's also in many ways chaotic. And that's why when COVID gets loose in this intensely packed place in which both its glories and its horrors are closely associated, so that because it is still a class and caste oriented system where different communities are really within their own community and not going to take orders from another community. This is not the intellectual artistic class I'm looking at here, but I'm talking about ordinary people in villages and so on. So that leads to an overall chaos, paradoxically fostered by intense organization at the local level. It's one of those paradoxes. I don't know if you want to ask me any questions, Frank, before, I'm giving my...
Yeah, listen to you, it makes us wonder, the significance that India as a state, where you say, most probably 3 million people, if not many more, already dead, was probably a 1%, Abhishek, that only vaccinated 1 or 2% of Indian
Right.
population. Even so, it is one of the great manufacturers of vaccine in the world, great facilities.
That's the paradox of India. It has this hugely advanced tech, hugely advanced chemical industry. And at the same time, it's got 1,400,000,000 people, or however many, huge population, of which certainly 700, 800, 900 million are not living that life. They're living a life still of extreme poverty.
Yeah, and this is perhaps the darkest hour. I think Abhishek said that when we talked about in Bangalore, since that state is created, it's the most dangerous moment, and we don't.
The Mahabharata War, I'd say. So India also has a huge history, both mythic and absolute. And at my age, I'm always a little hesitant to say the greatest, the worst, and so on.
Yeah,
because you can look back. I mean, at the time of partition, millions were killed as Muslims, moved to what became Pakistan and East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and Hindus. There were great riots. There were, that was a terrible time also.
Terrible time, yeah. Since then, since it became a state. But Richard, since like a Buddha, you encompass so much. They say, Buddha has a big belly because he can take so much in, and Ganesh actually also he can take the good and the bad of the world. As you do. So what do you think of this moment now, a little bit later than our last talk? Is this something where you feel actually this is a tremendous change now? Things will never be the same.
I tend to be optimistic in that belly of mine and pessimistic in my brain. So if my belly talks, I feel this too will pass. There's light at the end of even this tunnel. We won't get back to normal. Every historical moment that is important changes the course of history. Bertolt Brecht knew that. Marx knew that. History is not already written. History is what we write. So after COVID, things will be different. But will we always be meeting on Zoom? Will we always be doing? No. We will. Things swing, and then they swing somewhat back, but in a different way. And the question is, what will we make of this as an opportunity? At the other side of it, the pessimistic side, the brain, there's tunnel at the end of the tunnel. In other words, we have in the United States these raging fires. In Germany, you have those terrible floods and so on. There's a difference between climate and weather, but definitely the climate change is making for vast changes, and that will lead to extraordinary social unrest, the outcome of which I don't know, and neither does anyone know. But people your ages, Liwaa, Mumal, the younger people, you're going to be dealing with this, and so that the part of what COVID is an early warning system. So, and if I get a little depressed, it's because the world leaders have not so effectively dealt with COVID.
Yeah.
So then how are they going to possibly deal with climate change?
Yeah, if this is a dress rehearsal, it's not going well. Speaking of early warnings, 5 minutes, Richard. You have your 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
4 minutes. 4 minutes, yeah.
I want to read something that I wrote in 1976. So it's way back, and it's about one of these performances. And I wrote this, and I was giving a lecture in Delhi. So I just want to read it because it gives a sense of my participation. Watching performances of another Ram Leela troupe at Kishorban Temple, I penetrated further. The gopis, these are the small boys, were 6 or 7 years old. They needed promptings. They said their lines without understanding them or giving them emotive backup. Occasionally they fidgeted or looked around, dropped wholly out of character. But instead of ruining the performance or turning it into farce, their naivete was the main source of its power. The performance was a mix of religious ceremony with scrupulous attention to a fixed agenda, and theater with a story, costumes, music, and so on. It wasn't that the theatrical devices supported or expressed the religious sentiments or vice versa. Each operated in its own sphere, and between them a dialectical relationship developed. Then the sincerity of the non-acting made me doubt the theatricality of the situation. I mean, if religious belief is a function of projection, and if Vishnu takes the form of Krishna, a little boy who teased his playmates, and if all of these people believe for the time being that these children are those children, because Krishna is not a god like Christ, but a little boy like the one in front of me. You see, theater at this level can be very convincing because it asks the performer to be exactly who she or he is. Some training is necessary, but not pretense. In structural terms, the little boy and Vishnu converge on Krishna from opposite directions. It is Vishnu's Leela, that is his game, his sport, to incarnate himself as a little boy. It is the little boy's fortune to become Krishna in Ram Leela. And in that Leela, Vishnu and the little performer coincide. So this is the kind of theater I truly, deeply love.
And it's quite something, right? That for the moment, the little boy, is a god. And, that's, and it's so interesting that this is, this the Catholic and Protestant church say, is it really that the wine turns into the blood of Jesus and they were religious, but here's about a performer, makes it very clear, in a performance what the divine relations are.
Right, well, because the Leela is the boy as the boy, the child as the child. It's not miraculous. It's right there in front of you.
No miracle, it's no magic.
It is miraculous when you think, here we are as a species, and what we occupy and been given, what we can advance or ruin, and it's up to us.
It's up to us. It's incredible. As we said earlier, the 10 meters above us and the 10 meters below us, that critical zone, and we have to take care of it, and the consequences can be devastating. So really, thank you all for participating. Mumal, Liwaa, Pallavi, Richard, really also for taking the time and interrupting your work and your writing. This is so special to us. And Abhishek, so it's a big honor to be with all of you. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.